What are the interviews about?
What they've done, what they do, what they want to do but are afraid to ask for, what they wouldn't do even if asked. Anything I can think of. What year I...
Sex, Lies, and Videotape was written and directed by Steven Soderbergh. It was nominated for Best Screenplay at the Academy Awards in 1990. Soderbergh and Spader both won big at Cannes. Spader winning Best Actor and Soderbergh winning the Palme d'Or, equivalent to the best film at the festival. The story follows Anne, played by Andie MacDowell, a conservative housewife married to a lying husband, John, played by Peter Gallagher. Her world falls apart when John's college buddy Graham, played by James Spader, comes to visit, and the two spin off an unlikely friendship. Graham is somewhere between a Volcel and an Incel who cannot have sex with women because he can't become aroused in another person's presence. But he has a little pastime of interviewing women about sex. Meanwhile, John is cheating on Anne with Anne's sister, played by Laura San Giacomo. It's a beautifully written drama with an unsuspecting camera that still holds up today, and I want to analyze the screenplay and examine what made it so great. I'm going into full detail about this film, so if you haven't seen it yet, please watch it first. I had no expectations for this film, and I watched it 6 times this year alone, and I only saw it for the first time at the beginning of the year. So let's start at the beginning. The opening is an excellent introduction to this foursome of characters. Anne's talking to her therapist about her husband and this new friend that may be coming to visit. It cuts between John having an affair and Graham driving through Louisiana, making his way down. He's a kind of scrappy guy, changing in gas station bathrooms and probably living out of his car. Having a character talking to a therapist is a great way to start opening them up. It can be done cheaply, though, but here I don't think it is. Because we only have implications on why she's in therapy, and it's all in Andie MacDowell's delivery of it all anyways. We can tell what she's embarrassed about and not wanting to talk about, or, not completely telling the whole truth of some things. And with just the tiniest bit of insight, we know what type of woman Anne is. She's a stay-at-home woman, does all the cleaning, cooking, is apprehensive with her husband John, and is squeamish about the topic of sex. This whole opening is a dump of exposition, but it doesn't feel like exposition. We see all of the characters at once. Anne's conversation plays over the top, and Soderbergh weaves the starts of conversations into the previous scene. It's all in the script, and even in the commentary, Soderbergh talks about how MacDowell was able to blush on cue during this scene. He didn't even notice it on the day, but the camera still picked it up. The next hallmark scene to mention is the cafe scene between Graham and Anne. Spader's acting is so intriguing every second. Soderbergh wrote in the description of his script that Graham's face turns from remarkably handsome to just plain strange at any second. Spader is objectively a handsome fella, definitely the 80s and 90s epitome of kinky boys. So he's got that going for him. Tie in his character traits of this kind of inhuman, slightly disillusioned while sensing some sort of spiritualism about him, and he becomes just this magnetic presence on screen. You could definitely use the "don't judge a book by its cover" phrase for him. He's hot, then he's strange, but then he's always the most genuine and honest person in the room, so he's hot again, and it's remarkable. Here, he's out with Anne after they go apartment hunting. Graham is drinking his iced tea as always, and he asks her to share something personal, to which she says that she thinks sex is overrated, and that definitely tracks from her conversation with the therapist. Now we can infer why John left her, and it's cemented later on. Graham has one of the best lines ever in the film here.
I remember reading somewhere that men learn to love the person that they're attracted to. and that women become more and more attracted to the person that they love.
And then he admits that he's impotent. He can't have sex. What's groundbreaking about these conversations is Soderbergh was way ahead of all the other quote-unquote talkies. I think like people like Richard Linklater, Duplass, and Gerwig would jump into a decade later. The world is so grounded, but these are some fascinating characters that couldn't be so different than one another on paper. Graham's bold curiosity always asks questions that no one else would ask. And it's his whole composure that leads Anne to reveal these things. Anne's relationship with her sister is essential. Cynthia is sleeping with her sister's husband, to say the least. Cynthia's contempt and jealousy of her sister comes through in her delivery and context within the script. Anne has always been a straight-A student, always doing the right thing. Again, in the writing, we see the differences in the little setups that are paid off subtly later. Cynthia uses the F word frequently, and Anne even remarks on it, asking her why she says that so much. Right there, we can tell the difference between them. Anne thinks about what everyone thinks of her so much that she won't even risk cursing, and to which Cynthia just calls it descriptive. John swears too, but we don't think much about it until Anne tells him,
"You never used to say the word fucking."
It's just one of the hints that he's been spending a bit of time with Cynthia. I want to stop and mention something other than the screenplay. During the scene where Anne comes over to Graham's house where he's just watching a tape entirely in the nude, she finds out about the tapes. It disturbs her so much that she spills her tea and never wants to see him again. At least that's what her thinking in the moment is. But look at the camera and look at those move-ins. Soderbergh's camera is always moving in this film because he feared the audience would be bored. I think the slowly gliding camera does add some dynamism to the picture, adding a lot of impact during certain moments like this scene. It contrasts his later work in films like Logan Lucky, where he's intent on having every shot as stagnant as possible. Funny enough, I think Logan Lucky was actually the first Soderbergh film that I ever saw in a theater of all places, but back then I probably only went for the cast. The next smartly written scene is when Cynthia just walks into Graham's house unannounced. I suppose that wasn't unheard of back in '89. I know it wasn't unheard of growing up in Nebraska, but still, it's absurd. But it is hilarious seeing this gorgeous woman just walk into this hot, creepy guy's house. Hot and creepy is in though, right? She's trying to figure out what Anne's fuss is about with Graham, and she gets to learn firsthand. He asks her to do a tape. They begin by talking about her first sexual experience, to which she has to clarify.
My first sexual experience or the first time I had intercourse?
First sexual experience.
And she goes on to tell a story about when she was 8. It's interesting to hear her talk her side of things. All the while, Graham has this childlike disposition. This is the most graphic the film will ever get. This conversation here. And it's just dialogue about Cynthia talking about the male sex organ. Then it cuts at just the cruelest moment. So far I've mentioned sex and videotapes, but only hinted at the lies of it all. It's about John, first and foremost, but it's about how Graham corrected himself. He cannot lie. That's why it seems everyone he meets finds out about the videotapes by the end of the film. It's pretty clear right away to Graham that John is still a liar and can assume that he's cheating on his wife. At least until Cynthia confirms that, where Graham again cannot lie and says pretty clearly,
"No, I think John is a liar."
Anne's question of John's infidelity is officially out there, and of course, he lies about it.
I have a late lunch by myself and I'm fucking somebody.
He gaslights her. We all have heard that term by now, and she supposedly writes it off, but I don't think that answer satisfies her one bit. She finds Cynthia's lost earring, which is half mentioned earlier in the film.
Goddamn pearl earring.
But of course, John is able to then push his focus on Anne making a videotape with Graham, and then he mobs on over to see that video, only to find out Anne was the one making it all happen. The final sequence plays out beautifully. We've already seen Anne make it over to Graham's, and I love how the music coils and builds as we push in on the TV and into their conversation. What's great about the filmmaking process is how it all evolves over the production. I'm looking side by side at one of the drafts of the scripts, and it's very different from the film. Things like Anne spilling the tea was Annie MacDowell's addition, and Graham's sweat was something that more or less happened naturally or unconsciously with Spader. It's hard to compare what's in the text and on the screen by the end because I think what was made is the best version of the film. What I'm learning in school is typically adding things to a script is a red flag, but cutting is what makes a great script. And yeah, there's so much extra crap, really, it's crap in this script. The glory of this scene is the meaning behind it all. She's so afraid of opening up and feeling things that she's convinced herself, lied to herself, that sex has some sort of bad connotation to it. She's trapped in the confines of marriage like it's some sort of safety net. She blames it on Cynthia and tries to hide it under jealousy, but Anne's just lying to herself. Graham still considers himself a liar. A little lie doesn't seem like much because we all do it, and it can be for many reasons. Once you look at the lies you tell others that you tell yourself, you realize just how broken your reality is. You lose track of what you really want and need. And then the interview turns on him. Anne attacks him for making these tapes because she already decided that these were immoral acts. Graham's squeamish when the camera gets turned on him because he's still acknowledging the lies he tells himself. He's literally and figuratively cornered at this point, but he makes one of the most relatable points ever. Graham questions how he's supposed to simply analyze his past actions to the point where he is now, like he's something more than a psychiatrist. With that sultry stare, Anne thinks she's trying to help him with this problem, and Graham even recognizes that he has problems, saying that they are his and his alone, which is a lie. Graham's presence alone has made Anne leave her husband. His problems create problems for others. They stop talking, and Anne makes the first step. She massages his shoulders and touches his head. They embrace, and the scene explodes. The last lie that is told in the script is that John slept with Elizabeth 9 years ago, back when they were still friends. John is so lousy that he will never acknowledge his lies and accept defeat. So in a last-ditched effort, he tries to put Graham in his place. But Graham is so much more than that. Sex, Lies, and Videotape is one of the most introspective films out there. It asks the audience to invest in these strange people's lives and watch how you can take a hold of your own. Soderbergh's restraint is a masterwork. Just watching the trailer the studio made for this film makes it look like a sex romp when there's not one single bit of nudity, and it's one of the hottest films ever made. Soderbergh is such an interesting filmmaker. I was able to track his career in an auteur class at the school I'm going to, and I only really found Sex, Lies, and Videotape to really connect with. I certainly hadn't had a film impact me this much before. Subscribe for more, I guess, is what I'm supposed to say, but yeah, this has been Andrew. See ya.